BitHug, code management software is way too bloated. Try a new weight solution, BitHug. I just started my instance, so I have an hour counting down on the clock there. I've downloaded this TJZ file, and I have it here. So in the README, it tells you that you can run a local instance by running these two commands. So that's the docker build, which builds this thing, and then the docker run. So I'll go ahead and run that. Meantime, go ahead and start looking at the source code. And there's a bunch of interesting things in the source code. So we can get into a repo if we're the repo owner or we're an admin. So that's pretty good. So it'd be nice to be an admin. There are also these things called webhooks, which we'll see more about later. And here, so we're looking at admin. So the only way that we can become an admin is right here in the code if our source IP address is localhost. Now the good news is we saw those things about webhooks. So that'll help us get that same site request forgery. Here in this get file, we can see that there's this refs meta config where we get an access list for the file from access.conf. We'll see more about that in a little bit. And back to get API. So here, when we create a webhook, there's going to be some validation. It has to go to port 80, and it cannot go to localhost or the IP address for localhost. Now, I was a little excited about maybe using that IPv6 address, but that wouldn't help me get around this port 80 because we're actually listening on port 1823. But in good news for us, there's this format string. And this format string is going to take things that have these double curly braces and replace them. And so where we see that used is over here. I'm registering an account on this server. I'll create this webhook. So when I create a webhook, I can use these double curly braces, and it's supposed to let me substitute in like the branch name and the username. That's going to enable me, because those are called both for the URL and the body here, it's going to enable me to trick it into giving me what I want. So if we look for that format string, you'll see that it's used both on the URL and the body. So that's going to come in handy later, and it's going to let me fool it into thinking that the port of my webhook is 80 when actually it's 1823. Okay, so here we are. We have this thing here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create an access.conf file and put it where I want it. So these instructions here tell me that I can create an access.conf, put it in this refs meta config, and the right thing will happen. So I'm going to check out the empty repository. Okay, make sure that, get rid of that. I need to make my empty repository repos, create new repo, empty. All right, so clone the empty repository. I'm going to use Wireshark to capture this traffic going on. So catch HTTP traffic over here in Wireshark. And we'll say cd empty echo mcc2 access.conf. So here's where my friend Zach Wade really saved the day for me, because if we look at this access.conf file, what it actually does is it put a space right there at the end. So I do not want that space. That was terrible. All right, so then we're going to add that. And say get push origin at refs meta config. All right, so it posts this right here. And this pack is what I want. So I'm going to get my friends at GCHQ to help me encode that. So I've created a recipe here with CyberChef. I'm going to take in some hex. I'm going to convert it to base 64. So I'm going to grab this right here. And the data I want begins with those 30s. So this base 64 string here is what I need to send to this. So if I go here to this webhook, so when I put in one of these webhooks, it's actually only going to give me JSON or plain text. So I'm going to be able to use a curl command to send what I want. I'm going to go ahead and start using the actual server. So I'm going to register MCC. I'm going to create my repo webhook. And now I'm going to actually send this thing. All right, so connecting to this on correct port number. I want to be sending a webhook. I can get my user token from my cookie. And so this is sort of the magic that I talked about with those curly braces. So because these curly braces are here, when it parses it as URL, it's going to think that the host name is localhost bracket bracket, which is not localhost. It'll be fine. It'll think the port will be 80. But then at runtime, it actually swaps this out and tries to do a lookup on that and gets back nothing. So it really sends it to localhost 1823. So that format string is what enables me to cleverly do that. I need the body of this packet. to be the MD5 of that Git pack. Because basically I'm going to push to the Git server that access.conf file, not in my Git, but instead in the Git that I want. Right, so you see the Git there is going to _mcc.get. That's where the flag is. And so I grab this, copy that raw output to the clipboard, bam, and then the application xget receive pack request. All right, bam. All right, so now it's sent that over. And so when I do a GET request in the webhook GET, it's going to then call this for me and push that config file over to the package I want. So that's the plan. All right, so we'll go ahead and git clone this thing. HTTP, CC at web, no, not webhook. I want to be there on this one because this is actually the server. MCC Venus picoCTF.net 57091/mcc/webhook.get. All right. All right, so I've cloned it. I'm just going to create this file hi. So now that I've pushed that over, it should have fired my webhook. The webhook is going to go back to localhost, pushing my access.conf to the folder I want. Okay, so now we'll log out here. We'll register the user, MCC2, register, and then we'll go ahead and get my flag. And there it is, picoCTF. Good job at getting good.